We'll move on then to the Four Establishments of Mindfulness. And this is fairly long, so we'll try to abbreviate some things from this a little bit. This is a very well-known approach, and like I mentioned in the initial summary, introduction, there are a number of books available on this, so if you really want to get into it in a little bit more detail, you might want to do that so you can get some additional commentary on that and how all of these elements, because there are a lot of them, kind of infuse and work together with each other. But now we'll go through it as presented in the sutra. Thus I have heard the Blessed One was living in the Kuru country. There he addressed the monks. Monks, this is one-way path for the purification of beings, for the summoning of sorrow and lamentation, for the passing away of pain and dejection, for the attainment of the true way, for the realization of nirvana, namely the four establishments of mindfulness. What are the four? Here, monks, a monk dwells contemplating the body in the body, contemplating feelings in feelings, contemplating mind in mind, contemplating phenomena in phenomena. So continuing on 282, first we have contemplating the body, and there are 6 ways here presented for contemplating the body. The first one is through the mindfulness of breathing. So now they've organized all of these things into a more convenient way of going through them than the way that they were presented in the introduction. So paragraph 4, and how does the monk dwell contemplating the body in the body? Here a monk, gone to the forest, to the foot of a tree, or to an empty hut, sits down, having folded his legs crosswise, straightened his body, and established mindfulness in front of him. And that term is used over and over again. So usually, if we're doing it with a physical object, we've got something and we're looking out and forward and slightly down as a part of that. This would be a little bit difficult to do if you're following the approach of meditating with your eyes closed. So just one more reason. Almost all of the images of the Buddha, he's actually got his eyes open. They're looking down, but they are actually open. In front of him, just mindful, he breathes in. Mindful, he breathes out. Breathing in long, he understands. I breathe in long. Doesn't say it, he understands it. I think that's important. Or breathing out long, he understands. I breathe out long. Breathing in short, he understands. I breathe in short. Breathing out short, and so forth. And he trains thus. I will breathe in, experiencing the whole body. I will breathe out, experiencing the whole body. So that's 2 different levels there. There's the recognition of exactly how you're breathing, in or out, short or long. And then there's the experience of the whole body as a part of that. I will breathe in, tranquilizing the bodily formation. I will breathe out, tranquilizing the bodily formation. As a skilled lathe worker, making a long turn understands, or making a short turn understands, and so forth. In this way, this is paragraph 5, he dwells contemplating the body in the body internally, or he dwells contemplating the body externally, or internally and externally. Or he dwells contemplating the body in its nature of arising, or its nature of vanishing, or its nature of both. Or mindfulness that there is a body is simply established in him to the extent necessary for bare knowledge and repeated mindfulness. So it can also be done in a very, very simple manner. And he dwells independent, not clinging to anything in the world. So that there's a degree of detachment, at that level. That is how a monk dwells contemplating the body in the body. So the next one, the way, we're still talking about the body here, is the 4 postures. Again, monks, when walking, a monk understands, I am walking. And again, it's understands, not says. And then I am standing, and then I am sitting, and then I am lying down. Or however his body is disposed. So there are those simple ways, but we can actually be in other kinds of things as well. And then in the end, and he dwells independent, not clinging to anything in the world. That too is how a monk dwells contemplating the body in the body. So it's a form of mindfulness, and then also paying attention to that mindfulness of what's going on and what we are doing. The third approach here for the body is clear comprehension. In paragraph 8. Again, monks, a monk is one who acts with clear comprehension when going forward and returning, who acts with clear comprehension when looking ahead and looking away, when bending and stretching his arms, when wearing his robes and carrying his outer robe and bowl, when eating, drinking, chewing, and tasting, when defecating, urinating, when walking, standing, sitting, falling asleep, waking up, talking, and keeping silent. So virtually anything we do, just paying attention to doing it. And so this is an easy practice to do off of the cushion when we are doing things around the house. It's particularly easy to do when you're doing things that don't require a lot of concentrated thought. Doing the dishes, vacuuming the floors, things like that, driving your car actually. Although you have to be a little bit more careful about driving the car. I almost went off the road one time when I was meditating while trying to drive the car. So all of these kind of things, and even more detailed things than that. The better you get at it, the better you can do it even while you're doing more cognitive kinds of processes as well. So paragraph 9, in this way he dwells contemplating the body and the body internally, externally, and both. And he dwells independent, not clinging to anything in the world. That too is how a monk dwells contemplating the body in the body. And the fourth one is unattractiveness of the body. So here we're talking about purity versus impurity. Again, monks, a monk reviews this same body up from the soles of the feet and down from the top of the hair, bounded by skin as full of many kinds of impurity as thus. So all of these things are impurities here in this context. In this body there are head hairs, body hairs, nails, teeth, skin, flesh, sinews, bones, bone marrow, kidneys, heart, liver, diaphragm, spleen, lungs, intestines, mesentery, stomach, feces, bile, phlegm, pus, blood, sweat, fat, tears, grease, spittle, snot, oil of the joints, and urine. To name just a few. Just as though they were a bag with an opening at both ends full of many sorts of grain, and a man with good eyes were open to it and reviews it thus. This is a hill rice, this is red rice, these are beans, these are peas, this is millet, this is white rice. So too a monk reviews the same body as full of many kinds of impurity. In this body there are head hairs and urine, everything in between. In this way he dwells contemplating the body in the body internally, externally, and both. And he dwells independent, not clinging to anything in the world. That too is how a monk dwells contemplating the body in the body. So now we've had 4 different approaches. It doesn't mean you have to do all 4 of those approaches, but you can pick and choose. You've got some choices. But wait, there's more. On the next page, the elements. So here again, monks, a monk reviews this same body however it is placed, however disposed, as consisting of elements thus. In this body there are the earth element, the water element, the fire element, and the air element. Just as though a skilled butcher or his apprentice had killed a cow and were seated at the crossroads with it cut up into pieces, so too a monk reviews the same body as consisting of the elements. And then he just lists the elements again. In this way he dwells contemplating the body in the body, internally, externally, and both, and dwells independent, not clinging to anything in the world. So then finally we have the 9 charnel ground contemplations. And so these are a series of different options on what we can do based on what's going on with the body that's there in the charnel ground. Again, monks, as though he were to see a corpse thrown aside in a charnel ground, 1, 2, or 3 days dead, bloated, livid, and oozing matter, a monk compares his same body with thus. This body too is of the same nature. It will be like that. It is not exempt from that fate. In this way he dwells contemplating the body and the body, internally, externally, and both. And he dwells independent, not clinging to anything in the world. Then we go on to the second one. Again, as though it were to see a corpse thrown aside in charnel ground being devoured by crows, hawks, vultures, dogs, jackals, or various kinds of worms. A monk compares this same body with it thus. This body too is of the same nature. It will be like that. It is not exempt from that fate. So you're comparing your own body with the dead body and what's going on with that body and thinking, well, this can happen to that, and who knows when. Could be very soon. And then again, then it gives a short list here. The skeleton with flesh and blood, held together with sinews, a fleshless skeleton smeared with blood, a skeleton with flesh and blood, disconnected bones scattered in all directions. So a monk then compares this same body with it, and then goes through and compares with whichever of those. And then again with bones bleached white, bones heaped up, bones more than a year old, rotted and crumbled to dust, the monk compares this body with it. And then in this way he dwells contemplating the body, internally, externally, and both, or dwells contemplating the body, its nature of arising, vanishing, or both, or mindfulness that there is a body is simply established in him to the extent necessary for bare knowledge and repeated mindfulness. And then he dwells independent, not clinging to anything in the world. That too is how a monk dwells contemplating the body in the body. So even more options. There's quite a long list there of ways that we can do that. So just find the one that you identify best with to be able to do the practice in that way. So then the second way of mastering the mind here is contemplation of feelings. So in this one, and how, monks, does a monk dwell contemplating the feelings in the feelings? Here, when feeling a pleasant feeling, a monk understands, I feel a pleasant feeling. And it once more understands, not actually thinks about or labels it that way. When feeling a painful feeling, he understands, I feel a painful feeling. And then a feeling of neither painful nor pleasant. And then when feeling carnal pleasant feeling, or a spiritual pleasant feeling, or a carnal painful feeling, a spiritual painful feeling, a carnal neither painful nor pleasant, a spiritual neither painful nor pleasant, all of those things. In this way he dwells contemplating feelings in feelings internally, or dwells contemplating feelings in feelings externally, or both. Or, top of the next page, he dwells contemplating in feelings their nature of arising, or their nature of vanishing, or both. Or, in mindfulness, there is feeling, is simply established in him to the extent necessary for bare knowledge and repeated mindfulness. And he dwells independent, not clinging to anything in the world. That is how the monk dwells contemplating feelings in feelings. Next we have the mind, contemplation of the mind. And so now monks, how, monks, does a monk dwell contemplating the mind in mind? Here a monk understands the mind with lust as the mind with lust, and the mind without lust as a mind without lust. He understands a mind with hatred as a mind with hatred, and a mind without hatred as a mind without hatred. A mind with delusion or without delusion, a contracted mind, I think he means like focused there, and a distracted mind, so not focused, and then an exalted mind, maybe happy, I guess, might be what he's talking about here, or an unexalted mind. a surpassable mind or unsurpassable mind, a concentrated or unconcentrated mind, an liberated mind as being liberated, and an unliberated mind as unliberated. In this way, he dwells contemplating the mind internally, or contemplating mind externally, or both, or it's arising, or it's vanishing, or both, or else mindfulness that there is mind is simply established in him to the extent necessary for bare knowledge and repeated mindfulness. And he dwells independent, not clinging to anything in the world. That is how the monk dwells contemplating mind as mind. And then number 4, contemplation of phenomena. Lots of ways to do that. 5 different ways are listed here. So first we have the 5 hindrances as one of the ways to do that. Those are often described as sense desires, ill will, sloth, restlessness, and doubt. Sometimes other words are used for some of those. And how does a monk dwell contemplating phenomena in phenomena? Here a monk dwells contemplating phenomena in terms of the 5 hindrances. Here, when there is sensual desire in him, a monk understands there is sensual desire in me. Or when there is no sensual desire, he understands there is no sensual desire in me. And he also understands how unarisen sensual desire arises, and how arisen sensual desire is abandoned, and how abandoned sensual desire does not arise again in the future. So it comes, arises, abides, goes, doesn't come back. When there is ill will, and when there is dullness and drowsiness, when there is restlessness and remorse, or when there is doubt, a monk understands, using the last example of those, there is doubt in me, or there is no doubt. When there is no doubt, he understands how unarisen doubt arises, how arisen doubt is abandoned, how abandoned doubt does not arise again in the future. In this way, he dwells contemplating phenomena internally, externally, or both. Or dwells contemplating phenomena in their nature of arising, vanishing, or both. Or else mindfulness that there are phenomena is simply established in him to the extent necessary for bare knowledge and repeated mindfulness. And he dwells independent, not clinging to anything in the world. That is how a monk dwells contemplating phenomena in terms of the 5 hindrances. The next one then are the 5 aggregates, the constituents of the human body, if you will. Form, feelings, perceptions, thoughts, and consciousness. Again, a monk dwells contemplating phenomena in terms of the 5 aggregates subject to clinging. Here a monk understands such is form, such is its origin, such its passing away. Such is feeling, such its origin and is passing away. Such is perception, its origin and passing away. Such are volitional formations, basically thoughts or feelings. Well, feelings is a separate category here. Volitional formations, their origin, their passing away. Such is consciousness, its origin and passing away. In this way, he dwells contemplating phenomena internally, externally, and both. And he dwells independent, not clinging to anything in the world. Then in the next category we have the 6 senses, or 6 sense bases. And so here we have combinations of eye and seeing, ear and hearing, and so forth. And mind and thinking makes up the 6th one. So again, a monk dwells contemplating phenomena in terms of the 6 internal and external sense bases. Here a monk understands the eye, he understands forms, he understands the fetter that arises dependent on both. He also understands how the unarisen fetter arises, and how the arisen fetter is abandoned, and how the abandoned fetter does not arise again in the future. And so those fetters, those restraints that we have are the main focus here in terms of those elements. And so the first one is about eye and about forms. So the second one then is about ear. He understands the ear and also sounds. And then we do the nose and odors, the tongue and flavors, the body and tactile objects, the mind and phenomena. And he understands the fetter that arises dependent on both. Also, how the unarisen fetter arises, how the arisen one is abandoned, and how the abandoned fetter does not rise again in the future. In this way, he dwells contemplating phenomena, internally, externally, and both, and he dwells independent, not clinging to anything in the world. Next, we have the 7 enlightenment factors, and those are listed in here, so I won't list them right now. Again, monks. A monk dwells contemplating phenomena in terms of the 7 enlightenment factors. Here, when there is the mindfulness enlightenment factor, so this is the first one, in him, a monk understands there is mindfulness enlightenment factor in me. And there is no mindfulness enlightenment factor in me, and he understands how the unarisen mindfulness enlightenment factor, it's a mouthful, arises, and how the arisen mindfulness enlightenment factor comes to fulfillment by development. And then there is the discrimination of phenomena, so this is the second one, enlightenment factor. Then there is energy is the third one. Then we have rapture is the fourth one. Then we have tranquility is the fifth one. Oops, I think I missed one. And then concentration, and finally equanimity. Oh, that's 7. Okay, got the number right. So each of those, and looking at each of those, how it arises and then how it goes away, or if it's unarisen, recognizing that as well, and so forth. Then he also understands how unarisen, equanimity in this case, enlightenment factors arises, how the arisen factor comes to the fulfillment by development. In this way he dwells contemplating phenomena, in phenomena, internally, externally, and both, and he dwells independent, not clinging to anything in the world. And finally we get to the Four Noble Truths. Again, monks. A monk dwells contemplating phenomena in terms of the Four Noble Truths. Here a monk understands it as it really is. This is suffering. This is the origin of suffering. This is the cessation of suffering. This is the way leading to cessation of suffering, the path. In this way he dwells contemplating phenomena internally, externally, or both. Or dwells contemplating phenomena in their nature of arising, vanishing, or both. Or mindfulness that there are phenomena is simply established in him to the extent necessary for bare knowledge and repeated mindfulness. And he dwells independent, not clinging to anything in the world. So this one, the pattern, the way that it goes through this is actually quite similar to what we saw in the Four Establishments of Mindfulness. It's just that the focus is on the Four Noble Truths as a part of this. Those become the factors that we're looking at as a part of it. In next page 290, there's a conclusion here then. Monks, if anyone should develop these 4 establishments of mindfulness in such a way for 7 years, one of 2 fruits would be expected for him. Either final knowledge here and now, or if there is a trace of clinging left, non-returning. So in the next life, then non-returning is where that's the last life. So one more, the very next life we will achieve enlightenment. If anyone should develop these 4 establishments of mindfulness in such a way for 6 years, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1 year, 1 or 2 fruits would be expected. Either final knowledge here and now, or if there's a trace of clinging left, non-returning. Exactly the same results. Okay? If it was a 7 months, 6, 4, 5, 3, 2, 1 month, or half a month, the result is either final knowledge here and now, or non-returning. Okay? The length of time is getting much narrower here. If it's just 7 days, the final knowledge here and now, or non-returning. Once again, monks, this is the direct path for purification of beings, for the surmounting of sorrow and lamentation, for the passing away of pain and dejection, for the attainment of the true way, for the realization of nirvana, the four establishments of mindfulness. So even though we often talk about these vast periods and sometimes even eons, especially in the Theravada tradition, and even Mahayana talks about many lifetimes and so forth, usually in Vajrayana we talk about a single lifetime. But this gets it down to just 7 days. Okay? So it is possible to do it in a very narrow time frame. And so that's an optimistic view of things, that it is possible, if we do these practices earnestly and we really get the result that we're after as a part of that, it is possible to do it in a relatively short time frame. And so finally, the last one in this collection is the mindfulness of breathing. And this earlier he talked about how important this was to the Buddha himself. The Venerable, in this case Ananda, approached the Blessed One and said, "Venerable Sir, is there one thing which, when developed and cultivated, fulfills 4 things? And the 4 things which, when developed and cultivated, fulfill 7 things? And the 7 things which, when developed and cultivated, fulfill 2 things?" Now, what do you think the odds are that he actually asked the question that way without specifying what they were? Anyway, top of the next page, there is, Ananda, one thing which, when developed, cultivates, fulfills 4 things, and 4 things which, when developed and cultivated, fulfill 7 things, and 7 things which, when developed and cultivated, fulfill 2 things. But, Venerable Sir, what is the one thing? He responds, concentration by mindfulness of breathing. This fulfills the 4 establishments of mindfulness, and when developed and cultivated, fulfill the 7 factors of enlightenment, and when developed and cultivated, fulfill the true knowledge and liberation, the one thing. So then he goes through each of these again. We've already kind of looked at them, but this particular text goes through them once again. How, Ananda, is concentration by mindfulness of breathing developed and cultivated? A monk, having gone to the forest, to the foot of the tree, to an empty hut, sits down, having folded his legs crosswise, straightened his body, and set mindfulness in front of him. Just mindful, he breathes in. He breathes out. Breathing in long, he knows, I breathe long. Breathing out, he knows, I breathe out long. I breathe in short, I breathe out short. He trains thus, experiencing the whole body. I will breathe in. Experiencing the whole body, I will breathe out. Tranquilizing the whole formation, I will breathe in, bodily formation, and or breathe out. He trains thus, experiencing rapture related to breathing in and breathing out, happiness related to breathing in and breathing out, mental formation in terms of breathing in and out, tranquilizing in terms of breathing in and out. So all of those things goes through all of those factors. Then continuing on the next page, experiencing the mind, gladdening the mind, concentrating the mind, liberating the mind, contemplating impermanence, contemplating fading away, contemplating cessation, contemplating relinquishment. And then whenever Ananda, a monk, when breathing in long, knows I breathe in long and so forth as above, then trains in tranquilizing the bodily formation, I will breathe out. On that occasion the monk dwells, contemplating the body and the body, ardent, clearly comprehending, mindful, having subdued longing and dejection in regard to the world. I call this breathing in and breathing out. And then in the next paragraph he goes on, whenever Ananda, a monk, trains thus, experiencing rapture, I breathe in, breathes in. He trains thus, tranquilizing the mental formation, I will breathe out. The monk dwells, contemplating feelings and feelings, ardent, clearly comprehending, mindful, having subdued longing and dejection in regard to the world. That is, close attention to breathing in and breathing out. Whenever Ananda, a monk, trains thus, experiencing the mind, I will breathe in. He trains thus, liberating the mind, I will breathe out. The monk dwells, contemplating the mind. And then having subdued longing and dejection, again, there is no development of concentration and mindfulness of breathing for one who is muddled and who lacks clear comprehension. Whenever Ananda, a monk, trains thus, contemplating impermanence, I will breathe in, and thus he trains. And then contemplating relinquishment, I breathe out. And the monk dwells contemplating phenomena in phenomena. Having subdued longing and dejection, he is one who looks on closely with equanimity. It is, Ananda, when concentration by mindfulness of breathing is developed and cultivated in this way, that it fulfills the four establishments of mindfulness. The second part of this is the 7 factors of enlightenment. So again, he goes on, and how, Ananda, are the 4 establishments of mindfulness developed and cultivated so that they fulfill the 7 factors of enlightenment. Whenever, Ananda, a monk dwells contemplating the body, on that occasion, unmuddled mindfulness is established in that monk. On that occasion, the enlightenment factor of mindfulness is aroused, and the monk develops the enlightenment factor of mindfulness. And the enlightenment factor of mindfulness goes to fulfillment. And then he goes on to discrimination of phenomena, energy, spiritual rapture, tranquil, concentration, equanimity. So it goes through each of the different factors there. And then on that occasion, the enlightenment factor of mindfulness is aroused. The monk develops enlightenment factor of mindfulness. The enlightenment factor of mindfulness goes to fulfillment by development in the monk. And then this all could be similarly established. And finally, in the last part here, he becomes one who closely looks on with equanimity at the mind thus concentrated. The enlightenment factor of equanimity is aroused, developed, fulfilled, and then it is, Ananda, when the 4 establishments of mindfulness are developed and cultivated in this way, that they fulfill the 7 factors of enlightenment. The next one is fulfilling the true knowledge and liberation. So this is the final state, kind of the fruition here. How, Ananda, are the 7 factors of enlightenment developed and cultivated so that they fulfill true knowledge and liberation? Here, Ananda, a monk develops the enlightened mental factor of mindfulness, which is based on seclusion, dispassion, cessation, and maturing in release. So this is a little bit different list than some of the others that we've been looking at. He develops the enlightenment factor of discrimination of phenomena, energy, rapture, tranquility, concentration, equanimity, based upon seclusion, dispassion, and cessation, maturing in release. When the 7 factors of enlightenment are developed and cultivated in this way, they fulfill true knowledge and liberation. And then we have the achievement of mastery. How does all of this then culminate in the final setting here? Beginning on the 2nd paragraph, then in the evening, the Venerable Shariputra emerged from seclusion. And remember, this is where he's giving his story about how he has worked through all of these. So he comes from seclusion, and Ananda sees him coming and says to him, "Friend Shariputra, your faculties are serene, your facial complexion is pure and bright. In what dwelling have you spent the day?" Here, friend, secluded from sensual pleasures, secluded from unwholesome states, I entered and dwelled in the 1st jhana, accompanied by thought and examination with rapture and happiness, yet it did not occur to me, I am attaining the 1st jhana, or I have attained the 1st jhana, or I have emerged from the 1st jhana. So he's in the state, but he's not thinking about being in the state. It must be because eye-making, mind-making, and the underlying tendency to conceit have been thoroughly uprooted in your mind for a long time that such thoughts did not occur to you. And then on another occasion, and he goes through, and this time it's the 2nd jhana, and then the 3rd and the 4th, And then he moves on to the four formless states, the infinity of space, the infinity of consciousness, nothingness, the neither perception nor non-perception. And finally, the cessation of perception and feeling. So this is the one beyond mind. This is Rigpa, if you will, pure awareness. And then at the very end he says, it must be because eye-making, mind-making, and the underlying tendency to conceit have been thoroughly uprooted in your mind for a long time that such thoughts did not occur to you. So just as it is, okay? Don't think about it, you don't cling to it or grasp at it and so forth. Just let go and let be. Okay. Skipped over quite a few parts there, but a lot of repetition, so I think that we're still okay. You can go back and read it in more detail if you'd like all of the details on that.